Meeting of the Hendersonville City Council. Our first, we have on our agenda 3 public hearings. First public hearing is the Land Development Regulations Text Amendments proposed for conformance with Chapter 160D of the North Carolina General Statutes. And who is leading this? Is it? All right.
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Just lean in a little bit. I'm Scott Adams. I'm with the Land of Sky Regional Council, and I've been working with the Community Development Department on updates for Chapter 160D. And in a moment, I believe we'll have a presentation brought up. Okay. Let's see if this is on. Go. Let's see. It's coming along. Such. Okay. Yeah, that's all right. I'll just chime out. Next slide. So this, just as the title suggests, it's related to both your zoning ordinance and development-related ordinances. I'll just go through this briefly. So 160D in a nutshell is a relatively new state law that consolidates what were previously separate city and county planning and zoning regulations into one regulation. And the purpose is to really clarify, consolidate, and reorganize some of the statutes. It's largely been a collaboration between land use attorneys, the North Carolina School of Government, and the state legislature. And it was originally adopted in 2019, went into effect in 2020, and local governments are required to come into compliance with it as of 2021, which is why we're here today. Next slide, please. This is just a very brief overview. It's not meant to, you're not meant to read this in any high level of detail, but it's just to give you an idea of where things were in 160A, which is what applied to cities, and what is now in 160D. It's very much sort of a mirrored change of something like acquisition of open space, additional authority for open space acquisition. So a lot of it is a relatively one-to-one change in relationship. Next slide, please. So what's changing specific to Hendersonville? This is a listing of your ordinances that have been largely combed through by myself, staff, and your city attorney to bring all of your ordinances into compliance with 160D. I'll make one small note there on items 7 and 8. Historic preservation guidelines are now definitively called standards. It's just clarifying language to ensure that they are standards, not just guidelines. They are requirements. Next slide, please. And I'll be glad to take any questions just briefly after this. So just a couple more examples of things that are changing. The Board of Adjustment has always been a quasi-judicial body, meaning that it's not legislative like you all are, or like the Planning Board, which is advisory. It is a quasi-judicial body. As such, just a slight change in language is the change from a general public hearing to an evidentiary hearing. That means that they're considering evidence in a quasi-judicial setting. Slight nuance there. It's a public meeting. Anyone can attend, but it is not a public hearing in the sense that just anyone can speak. It is, you have to have legal standing as it is a quasi-judicial body. Another change on that second bullet there is the notice of decision. Notices of decision on administrative decisions have always been posted in writing. A slight change is to have an actual posting of a sign on the property after the decision's been made. It's not a requirement, but it's just a fuller, better practice for abundant communication.
May I ask a question about that one?
Yes.
Does that include like a zoning change?
Yes.
Okay, so after they have the post for the meeting,
Right.
and then after it's over, there's another sign now that would say
Yeah,
it was
it's
changed
just-
to, or it was not changed, either way?
It's
Only if
really
changed.
just, it's closing the loop on communication, so it's stating whatever the decision was, it's both going out in writing and being posted on the subject properties.
Okay.
And the last bullet there, just clarifying conflict of interest language. This has been broadened both for planning staff and for all relevant development-related boards, such as the Planning Board and Board of Adjustment. Next slide, please. A couple of more examples of things that, there were two words that were used throughout 160D, must and may. You must do this, you may do this. These are a couple examples of must changes. The first bullet there is fairly important, and it's actually a continuation of a 2015 state law that prohibited what are called building design elements for 1 and 2 family structures. So essentially things like windows, materials, facades, different things like that cannot legally be regulated by zoning or conditional zoning. They can be voluntarily entered into by an applicant or a developer, but per state law, they cannot be required. So that's somewhat of a substantive change, at least for these zoning districts listed there. Another slight change in nomenclature is conditional use permits become special use permits, and this is to avoid confusion with conditional zoning, which is what you all do through a legislative process. Special use permits will be done through the Board of Adjustment, as they always have been with conditional use permits. So it's a little bit of changing of language, but just trying to clarify who's doing what. Also, just a note here that there is some updated language on permit choice and vested rights. Permit choice is essentially if you have a substantial amount of your application in that is deemed complete and or a substantial amount of dollar investment in a project, you are allowed to stick with the original regulations that you came in under, even if there is a change in the regulations in the duration of your project. Lastly, there are definitions for buildings, dwellings, dwelling units, and bedrooms. That's partly aligned with the state building code, but it's also, there are some definitions that come directly from 160D. So it's just, again, getting clarity and consistency with state law.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
One of these. This is the first bullet under 160D 702. So if someone comes for conditional zoning and we say you must plant a tree or some standard for
Right.
1 and 2 dwelling units, you said we cannot legally require them, but can we decide to vote down the conditional zoning if they don't do it? If they don't agree to it?
For anything building element designed or
Yes.
a landscaping requirement?
Good question. I'll say, I guess this only relates to building elements, so I'll just say a building element.
Right. That's my understanding. I would want to clarify that likely with the city attorney, but that is my understanding.
So in other words, if we said you have to have a curved roof or something, which I'm not saying we would do that.
Right.
And they said no, and we said, okay, we're going to vote it down, you're saying that that would be going against this statute?
It would be going against the statute in that you are asking, I guess, you are making a requirement or a condition of the approval on a design element. That's my
Okay.
understanding of the state law.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Even if it's 2-story, 3-story?
So
We didn't want a
height-
3-story?
Height is still something that can be regulated. So height, massing, bulk, those are all basic, dimensional standards of sorts. When you get into, if it's a 2-story building, it must have a slate roof versus, traditional architectural
So
shingles.
height still is.
Right. So basic building design elements of height and massing, setbacks, all those things are still perfectly legally enforceable and recognized by the state statute. It's just for 1 and 2 family dwellings, whether it's a single family detached house or a duplex, the law is stating that you cannot design, I guess, exterior building elements on it.
But if we discussed with the applicant, hey, could you do a brick facade, and they agreed to do it?
Yes,
Then
yeah,
you could.
yeah, so the language that's currently in the zoning ordinance that I basically added based on the state law is, applicants may voluntarily consent to any and all building design elements. So it's certainly, it's not ruling it out, but it's just stating clearly that per state law, you cannot require it, so. Any other questions on that for now? Okay, I'll just got a couple more slides, and I'm glad to take any more questions. So if we'll go to the next one, jumped quick. These are a couple of examples of the May changes. Again, just getting into the word special. The word special currently or recently appeared in your zoning ordinance under special requirements. The language change suggested was to supplementary standards. It's a little bit of nuance, but essentially you have some districts that have by right uses with additional standards on them. So the suggested language is for supplementary standards, and that way it's not confusing special use permits and the word special. We're making the word special special. Another clarification, just on types of decisions, administrative decisions, development approvals, and determinations. These are just being clarified for who's doing what. So when you all make when you either have a hearing, it'll be a legislative hearing or a legislative decision versus the planning board, which is an advisory hearing or advisory decision, versus quasi-judicial at the Board of Adjustment. So just really just a clarification of language. The criteria for variances, the language has been slightly revised and reordered, but the overall spirit and purpose behind it still remains the same within 160D. And lastly, a couple of terms that have been added related to the state requirements for defining dwelling units, just the differentiation of condominium versus fee simple ownership. It's really just speaking to the ownership structure and also what can potentially be done within a physical building form. And that's also a slight reference to the state building code, again, just trying to get some more definitive definitions of sorts. So these were some suggested May changes. And I believe with that, last slide, glad to take any more questions. And we, of course, have your city attorney here who's also graciously done a secondary review of a lot of the ordinances as well.
Questions, anyone?
For anyone?
For anyone.
I just want to clarify something. This is something that, Ms. Beaker, you sent to us, which is, and I'm assuming this is part of this discussion. It doesn't relate to necessarily land use, but you put in our packet that a council member can abstain from voting on land use regulation, something that relates to the land use.
On a legislative decision, like to adopt, appeal, or revoke, yes, any land use regulation, that's
Right,
correct.
so does that mean, like, for example, a zoning change?
Yes,
So if you don't mind me asking, since we've never had this before,
yeah.
how does practically you come to Mr. Smith and I say abstain, or how does that work?
Mayor Volk may want to chime in since she's the expert on Robert's rules. but
Okay, okay.
I've advised
Sorry, I'm
that-
not trying to.
I've
sorry.
advised that just for clarity and for the record, that she asked for the ayes, the nays, and were there any abstentions, so that the record could reflect who abstained. And the other difference is before, if you abstained and didn't vote, it's counted as a yes.
Right,
In this case, it's as counted as nothing. You just didn't vote. We did have some follow-up discussion, and under Robert's rules, let's say 2 members abstained. Under Robert's rules, that motion would pass by 2-1, but after I spoke with Mayor Volk and looked in the statute requires, just as an affirmative requirement, that in order to pass, a majority of the actual membership must vote in favor. So it's going to diverge from Robert's rules, I think, on that point. So if you had 2 abstain, the remaining 3 would all 3 have to vote in favor of the motion for the ordinance to be adopted, for it to have any legal effect. Does that answer your?
yeah, that answers my question. Thank you.
Any other questions for me?
What justifies abstaining?
Great question. You don't have to have a reason.
No, that's the thing, is you don't have
That's
to
what
have a
I'm saying.
conflict.
I don't understand this. I could just decide I don't want to vote?
That's what this law says.
For this particular type of motion, yes, you could just decide. On all the others, the only other way you could not vote and have it not count is if you had a conflict of interest that barred you from voting.
Right, I understand
And that
that
makes
piece.
sense, right,
Right.
but yes, you don't have to give a reason. I don't know the reason behind the legislative change, but.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I'm just asking for clarification.
I
that
thought
that
I
is
was
in
just
fact what it
stupid
meant.
and missed that, but I mean, it was just,
So you can, council member, anything that's land development regulation, they can abstain.
To adopt, repeal, or revoke, but like any other type of decision that might come before you, which is gonna be hardly any, but anyway, it's got to be that legislative decision. I guess they're granting you individually a little bit more discretion,
who came up with this?
the legislature.
Oh, never mind.
And then obviously this is only for land development regulations. It's not in all other things.
That's correct. And another change, since we're talking about procedural changes, is that you don't have to have a second reading. In other words, right, so, and that's a change. For cities, that's a change. It's always that way for counties, but change for cities.
But that's, once again, only, or is it only for land development regulations, or is that's only for those? Any other thing, as we might vote on, would have to have a second reading if it didn't have a 4-1 vote, or 5
Any
vote.
other ordinance?
Ordinance.
Yes.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate the help of Land and Sky.
Absolutely.
Your help. Council members, discussion or motions, plural? We have 3 that we have to make.
Let's do all 3 of them.
Madam Mayor.
What? Oh, yeah, that's it. My brain is fried for some reason. After being gone all last week, I'm still not back to where we need to be. Madam Clerk, has this public hearing been advertised in accordance with general statutes?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes, not quite the way we intended, but it was finally advertised. I will open this public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak regarding the land development regulation text amendments? Anyone who likes to speak?
Oh, come on.
We understand that.
Okay.
Oh,
Well,
Oh,
It's not about any property.
everywhere. It's just clean, they just cleaned it up.
It's, at this point, it doesn't impact any property. This is just procedural and zoning ordinance. We'll get to the property matters in just a minute or two. So this is just related to our zoning ordinance and some changes in the state legislature to change the document and what the legal language says. So,
Plus, the county had one set standard, right, and the city
yeah.
had a different set, and now they,
Does it give you more power or less power?
It just clarifies procedural matters. I don't know that it changes much power.
Yeah.
It just clarifies when the main thing is clarifies some of the language and should make it easier, I think, is to implement the zoning ordinance and other codes. So
There's 7, right.
there's seven.
Seven.
Stormwater, so it's just cleaning up some legal language. It's probably been in effect since a long time, so.
Right. It's, most of it is just clarifications.
Yes.
I wouldn't
They
say
it's
that.
simplification, but I would disagree.
yes.
I think,
you want a copy?
It's job security for the people in Raleigh.
I think part of it is counties and cities were operating under different land use regulation statutes, so that's no longer the case. It's all the same, so that whether you're operating in a county or a city, you're looking for something, you have the same set of laws that you're going by. But to go back to your question, it's not my perception that it takes away any power we've had. It does change a couple of things, like the abstaining from voting, that kind of stuff. But it makes it so that basically the county commissioners and the city council are operating under the same guidelines when they're deciding whether or not to allow or not allow something. And we're mandated by the state to do it. So it's done.
Yeah,
That's exactly
we
right.
don't have any choice.
All we've done is rewrite our ordinance to match what the state says you must do now. Yeah.
Any other comments? Not, we'll close that public hearing. And now we're ready for discussion or motions.
We need to read all
I'll take the first one.
Okay?
Madam Mayor, I move City Council adopt an ordinance of the City of Hendersonville City Council to re-adopt and amend the zoning ordinance of the City of Hendersonville, North Carolina for conformance with Chapter 160D of the North Carolina General Statutes as presented, finding that the re-adoption of the zoning ordinance and amendments is consistent with the comprehensive land use plan, and that it is reasonable and in the public interest for the zoning ordinance, including the land development planning boundary for the city, to be in compliance with Chapter 160D of the North Carolina General Statutes.
Is there any discussion? Not, those in favor of motion number 1, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and that motion is adopted. Next.
Madam Mayor, I move City Council adopt an ordinance of the City of Hendersonville City Council to re-adopt and amend the subdivision ordinance of the City of Hendersonville, North Carolina for conformance with Chapter 160D of the North Carolina General Statutes as presented, finding that the re-adoption of the subdivision ordinance and amendments is consistent with the comprehensive land use plan, and that it is reasonable and in the public interest for the subdivision ordinance to be in compliance with Chapter 160D of the North Carolina General Statutes.
Is there any discussion? Not, those in favor of motion 2, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. And that motion has been adopted. Number 3.
Madam Mayor, I move City Council adopt an ordinance of the City of Hendersonville City Council to re-adopt and amend Chapter 12, Chapter 24, Article 2, Chapter 24, Article 3, Chapter 28, and Chapter 40 of the Code of Ordinances for Hendersonville, North Carolina, for conformance with Chapter 160D of the North Carolina General Statutes as presented, finding that the readoption of these chapters and articles of the Code, including the amendments, is consistent with the comprehensive land use plan, and that is reasonable and in the public interest for these chapters and articles to be in compliance with Chapter 160D of the North Carolina General Statutes.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Not, those in favor of motion number 3, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Okay. Thank you. A lot of work went into that. Of time and effort. Okay, next we have a standard rezoning of 305 South Wooded Street.
Council members, Madam Mayor, good morning. Slightly different time of day, seeing you guys, but glad to be here. The item before you is, as mentioned, a standard rezoning or a zoning map text amendment for the William Schaefer property along South Wooded. And this property includes 3 parcels. There is a single-family home at 305 South Wooded, so kind of using that address, but there are 3 pins involved. The existing zoning is split between R15 and I1, and they're proposing to rezone it to R6. It's just under an acre total. There is a proposal for 1 additional single-family home to be constructed, though with this rezoning, there would be no use would be binding, and no site plan would be binding. They could potentially utilize, if approved, any other permitted uses under R6, which is essentially 1-family, 2-family dwellings, along with some other neighborhood-compatible uses such as parks and churches, neighborhood centers, things like that. This is a survey of the property. At the top, you see a small sliver parcel, which is really, as it stands today, in reality, is just kind of absorbed into the single-family property. And then, so in the middle, you see where the single-family home is located. That's the middle property. And then at the bottom, on the corner of Dale Street and South Wooded, is the third vacant piece of property, and it shows some old parcel lines where it had originally been platted as three small parcels, but that is one parcel today. Taking a look at the property, just some photo reconnaissance, the corner of South Wooded and Allen shows, some of the landscaping that's associated with the single-family home in the upper left. As you move to the upper middle picture, you see the single-family home and the accessory structure in the back. Moving south on South Wooded, you see the vacant parcel, which has a number of mature trees on it. Bottom left photo, if you step just inside those trees, you can see it kind of opens up a little bit. And then as you go down to the corner of South Wooded and Dale, you see another angle in the bottom middle picture of that wooded area. And then going down Dale Street, looking back at the property, you see some vacant property to the left. It's the bottom right photo, and that's an adjacent parcel. And then you see where the trees are. That's the vacant parcel that's on the south end of the property in question. So looking at current zoning, you see that not only is it split, the zoning is literally split down the center of the middle parcel. And so it's R15 on the northern half and I1 on the southern half of the subject properties, which are highlighted in yellow. And then the proposed zoning would take all that and rezone it to R6, which is found across the street. And so it is prevalent in this area. And we'll have a little bit more on that in just a minute. Looking at the existing land use, there is multifamily to the north. There are some industrial uses. Some of that property is actually for sale right now. To the south, there's a good chunk of vacant property. You have the Yakusta Trail, future Yakusta Trail cutting right down below this property to the south. And then to the east, you have small lot, single-family residential. In the future land use map, to the south is a high-intensity neighborhood, and to the north is a medium-intensity neighborhood, and that's the future land use designations for this property. Again, it's split. Looking at the high-intensity neighborhood, you see it references 8 or more units per gross acre, encouraging walkable neighborhood design that creates attractive and functional roadway corridors and multifamily residential neighborhoods. You look at the medium intensity neighborhood, and you have an intention to provide a transition between the high and low intensity neighborhoods, and similarly promoting a walkable neighborhood design and compatible infill development. This property is also located in the Lenox Park National Register Historic District. And so where we saw all the R6 that was across the other side of South Witter Street, all of that property and some of the property to the south is included in this Lenox Park National Register Historic District. It's not a local historic district, so there are no design guidelines or anything associated with it. But it is noted for its historic character. And so there's a tie there that crosses South Witter Street, and so rezoning it to R6 would also kind of further that tie so that the minimum lot sizes, things like that, would be compatible with what's already in place in Lenox Park. The planning board considered this at their meeting on June 14th. They supported it unanimously. There was very little discussion after the staff presentation, and they moved forward with a motion to recommend approval to you for this rezoning from the I1/R15 to R6 high-density residential. So with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, has this public hearing been advertised in accordance with general statutes?
Yes, Mayor.
So we will open this public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding the rezoning on South Wooded Street? Anyone who would like to speak? If you need to come to the microphone and give your name and your address, please.
I am Barbara Cromar, resident of Hendersonville in the county. My question is, with the additional number of residential facilities, what about transportation and the roads exiting onto Dale or Whittitt? What's the plan for traffic?
So this particular application does not trigger a transportation impact analysis, and the rezoning of this scale wouldn't necessarily warrant any additional study of traffic impacts. At most, we're looking at maybe 1 or 2 additional units. That's possible on this property.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to?
Can we respond to her as well, Ms.?
Yeah, you want to?
Yeah, so what he's saying is that with this rezoning, you might get 2 houses instead of 1. So in other words, we're not talking about apartment units, we're not talking about anything like that. Because if it's R6, I think you can also build a duplex, right? So there might be a duplex built with 2 families there, but that's pretty much all that can happen there unless, I suppose somebody could build a church on it, right? That's allowed, but that's not in the plan. So in other words, the zoning does not allow for like an apartment complex or something like that. So the point he was making is that the additional traffic you're looking at is maybe 1 or 2 families at most.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak regarding the rezoning on South Wooded Street? If you need to come to the microphone, give your name and address, please.
My name is Barbara Decker. I live at 853 Dale Street on the corner of Dale and Whitted. My question is, he kept showing apartment units. Is that proposed for that area?
That's a great question.
In your presentation, you were talking about apartment units and other land that's being developed. Is that in that area?
So I believe she's making reference to the future land use designations and what our comprehensive plan calls for. So that is in our comprehensive plan, that this area is designated for that potential future use. However, the specific rezoning and the specific question before the council today is simply to rezone it to R6. And that R6 zoning would establish the limits of development on it. And that goes back to my last answer, which is the most that you could increase the intensity of this property, or the most development that could occur on this property, is 1 or 2 additional units, whether it's a duplex or whether it's 2 single-family homes. So there is a little bit of discrepancy between what the comprehensive plan says is possible here and what is actually being proposed as the question before the council today, the decision that they're making today. That's correct, and only for the R6 zoning, which limits it to single-family and 2-family residential units. Can't do multifamily.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to comment on the South Wooded Street rezoning? Is there anyone online that is seeking recognition?
Mayor Volk, there are no hands raised online for any comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. We'll close that public hearing. Council members, discussion or a motion?
Can I just follow up with
Yeah.
her question? Just to also to further comment on what he said. So we are required by the state to have a comprehensive land use plan, which is basically an idea of, as the city grows, this is how it grows. And so the medium intensity neighborhood that he talked about is on the comprehensive plan. We're not necessarily required to stick with that, and the picture that he showed you is an example of what could happen in that area. However, as he pointed out, the zoning that we are doing would not lead to that, what you saw in the picture, which is the apartments and all that. So we are limiting ourselves to something less than that. So that's kind of where that land use, the comprehensive plan term comes in. We're required by law to have one, and if, as you'll get ready to see here in this motion we're getting ready to read, we have to kind of explain reasons why we either go with it or against it, by law, when we are making zoning decisions. So that's what that picture was.
All right. Additional comments or motion?
Madam Mayor, I move the city council approve the adoption of an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city of Hendersonville, changing the zoning designation of the subject properties, pins 9568-46-9083, 9568-45, -9994 and 9568-55-0841 from I-1 R15 zoning to R6 high-density residential zoning district based on the application submitted by the applicant, finding that the rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan's future land use map and that the rezoning is reasonable in the public interest due to the fact that its proposed zoning is compatible with the area.
Is there any discussion? Not. Those in favor of the rezoning on South Wooded Street, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and this has been rezoned.
That's the question?
Yep.
Would that have been an example where she should have said, are there any abstentions? Because this is land use.
But, I mean, of course, it's her discretion to judge whether,
No, no.
if she heard five
I could hear,
voices,
I could hear everybody
Yeah, no, I'm just
saying
saying,
yes, so.
this is our first opportunity at that new law that if somebody wanted to abstain, they could.
correct,
Okay,
Okay.
just asking that, yeah.
good example.
I thought of it, but I could hear everyone say.
No, that's fine. I'm just wondering like, hey, boom, we pass it, and bang, here we are already.
Yeah. I'll do it on the next one.
No.
Just for you, Jerry.
I'm not going to abstain. I'm like, this is the direct example of what we just
I
talked
might
about.
abstain just for the heck of it, just saying.
Okay, now we come to the one that has the most interest here, a standard rezoning Monroe Drive and Asheville Highway.
Good morning, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. The city is in receipt of a zoning map amendment application from Larry and Mary Maitland. This is for a portion of a property. This is not rezoning an entire property. I just want to make that distinction at the beginning. So it's a portion of PIN number 9569-36-9825. This is the corner of Monroe Drive and Asheville Highway. The existing zoning on this piece of property is R10 medium density residential. The application is to change the zoning to C3 highway business. The total acreage of this portion is approximately 0.06 acres. The proposed use would be a commercial use, and this would basically remove the split zoning from this parcel. So on the screen, you see the survey for the property. The applicants own the property directly to the east, which is this property right here. That's 2115 North Stony View Court. The applicants did a lot line adjustment for the properties, which moved the property boundary between the two properties closer to the existing single-family house, so that the commercially zoned property would have more acreage. The applicants did this lot line adjustment through our office, and both properties meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance. Pointing to the screen, this dotted line right here was the previous lot line. So that was the line that was abandoned. So the new property line is over here. So as you see, this R10 zoning that is being rezoned was originally a part of this parcel over here. So everything on this side was originally C3, and everything on this side was R10. Prior to the lot line adjustment, like I mentioned, the entire parcel to the left was zoned C3 highway business. However, the zoning does not move with the property line adjustment. So the new portion of the property is still zone R10, medium intensity, or medium density residential. As a conventional rezoning, there is no binding site plan or restrictions of uses beyond what is permitted by the zoning ordinance. The property, if rezoned, would still have to go through the site plan review process with city staff for any development. The site plan, or the site would also have to adhere to all requirements for any commercial property that abuts residential uses. So this is some pictures of the parcel as a whole, basically. So the top left corner basically shows the literal corner of Monroe Drive and Asheville Highway. The other photos on the top are pictures from Asheville Highway and Monroe Drive. The picture on the bottom right that has a red square around it, that's really the one that you probably should be focusing on, because that kind of shows the portion that's being rezoned. And granted, it's showing some of the portion that's already zoned C3, but that picture is a better representation of where the rezoning is actually occurring, which is kind of where that Jeep is located along that area. So, as I mentioned, the current zoning and proposed zoning maps are on your screen. As you'll see, the section of the parcel on the eastern boundary would be the only section of the property that would be rezoned. The remainder of the property is already zoned C3. Parcels to the north are zoned C3 highway business and R10 medium density residential. Parcels located to the east are zoned R10 and include a single family neighborhood. Parcels located to the south are zoned C3 highway business and R10 residential. Parcels to the west are zoned C3 and contain commercial uses such as the Blue Ridge Commons Plaza. The portion of the subject pen can be developed commercially now. However, in order to use the remainder of the property for a commercial use, that requires that that portion of the property be rezoned. The rezoning would make the parcel uniform and would eliminate the split zoning that is shown on the screen. Much like the zoning, the parcel has a split future land use designation as well. The portion of the property is classified as medium intensity neighborhood. The remainder of the property is classified as neighborhood activity center. So we got into this with the last presentation. The comprehensive plan is a guidance document. It basically shows how the city was proposed to grow, and this is something that's a consideration for rezonings. The rezoning and the ordinance is the actual, and the zoning ordinance is the legal documents. This is the comprehensive plan is a guiding document that gives insight to how the city council and city staff saw, and city citizens saw the city growing over time. So as you'll see, the goal of medium intensity residential is to provide a transition between high and low intensity neighborhood areas while providing a wide range of housing formats and price points. Promote walkable neighborhood design and compatible infill development in new neighborhoods, and as a means of preserving and enhancing existing neighborhoods. The growth management for this portion of property is preservation and enhancement. So, as you probably can see from the last slide, the property's classification of medium intensity neighborhood does not align with commercial uses that are allowed under C3 zoning. If rezoned, the property's future land use map designation for this portion would have to be changed as well to neighborhood activity center to better align with the new allowable uses. The goal of this designation is to concentrate retail and dense walkable mixed-use nodes located at major intersections in order to promote a sense of community and a range of services that enhance the value of Hendersonville's neighborhoods. The remaining portion of this parcel is already classified as neighborhood activity center. If changed, the property would no longer have a split designation. It would be under one uniform designation. The planning board took this project up at their June 14th, 2021 meeting. The planning board voted 5-1, recommending that the city council change the zoning designation of the subject portion from R10 to C3. and also recommended changing the future land use designation for this section to Neighborhood Activity Center. The motion in full is on the screen and in your packets. Some discussion by the board was about the access to the site and commercial traffic on Monroe Drive. Mary Maitland is the applicant. She's here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions from the staff side. Yes, sir.
The change of the comprehensive land use plan to neighborhood activity center only applies to this lot.
Correct.
I mean, and I guess it only applies to this little sliver of this lot.
Correction, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, the rest of the PN number is already under this designation, so the change of that designation would only be for this sliver on this lot alone.
And it doesn't apply to the rest of the medium intensity neighborhood that's, you know, behind this lot.
It does not.
And this doesn't affect that at all.
It does not, no.
Okay, yeah,
No,
we'll
I'm talking about the
get to public hearing
designation.
in
No,
a-
I'm asking for the designation on the map. It doesn't change the,
Okay, we'll get to, please, we'll get to the public hearing in a minute. This is time for council to get their questions asked. Okay. I had a question that the odd shape in the front of the parcel, that the corners kind of cut off, that would mean that that part is not their property and could not be developed?
Correct. That is a DOT right-of-way, and the right-of-way is pretty wide in that area, and there's actually a pretty large grade change, so that right-of-way kind of just drops off. But yes, exactly, that whole little corner that's been cut off is DOT right-of-way.
Anyone else have questions? Not, no, we'll get to public hearing in a few minutes, please. No, that's part of public hearing, we'll get to that in a few minutes. Council have questions?
So the portion
Okay.
that we're rezoning is only 0.06 of an acre.
Yeah, approximately.
That's requested.
All right. Okay. If the developer would like to make a presentation?
Good morning.
Again, if you could introduce yourself and give.
I'm Mary Ann Maitland. This is my husband Larry. We own each lot, the C3 zoned lot and the R10 zoned lot in front. And the purpose of this is for our business use, but it's not a retail location. It is for a workshop and an office for my husband. So it would not increase or draw traffic to the area. When we do business, we use subcontractors, and they are located in their own locations. So we don't have employees that come and stay at that location as well. So the amount of traffic would be extremely limited to what it is now, actually. We're in and out of that on a daily basis. So it wouldn't impact the traffic within the residential area. We own the residential lot as well, and we have made substantial improvements to that aesthetically, and we intend to do the same to the city lot.
Any questions for Ms. Maitland?
I have a question. So when you say on the residential lot, you don't mean, do you mean the house?
Yes.
Okay, that's where you live.
No, we don't live there. We own it, and we're
Own it.
remodeling it and upgrading it.
Okay, that's what you meant by the residential lot, not the
Yes.
R10 portion, but the actual house lot.
The actual house, the lot in front of this proposed area that we would like to change. This little sliver of land that we want to add to the commercial side of it would just increase our maneuverability within the parking area. It's not going to be developed with buildings or anything like that. And as well as per the requirements for the city, we are going to be planting well over 100 plants to buffer between the residential and the commercial lot. So it probably won't even be visible from the residential lot.
Am I allowed to ask what kind of business it is?
If I may interject, thank you, great question. So, and it kind of relates back to the last hearing we had too. When you're doing a standard conventional rezoning, you really should not consider what the proposed use is. Legally, you are to focus on what all the permissible uses are, right? And so, while, yes, you can ask it, you really shouldn't consider that in your decision.
Also, the point is, if it is rezoned, your intentions may be great, but at some point when you sell it,
Right.
then it opens it up for all C3 at that point, and they can do anything that is permitted in C3. So we're
Well-
not just, this doesn't go with your ownership. It goes forever and ever till it's
Yes,
adjusted again.
exactly. But the lot is now C3 anyhow. We're just adding a few square feet to it.
The few square feet are what
Yeah.
I'm talking about.
Right.
It has to be considered for anything. It could be, even though you're just wanting to use it for parking. Could be a building on, up to the setbacks.
Any other questions, Ms. Maitland? Okay, thank you. No, oh, yes, I'm sorry. I didn't see who was speaking.
I'm Larry Maitland, Mary Ann's husband. And like I say, when we bought the property 2 years ago, the house hasn't been lived in for 15 years. It was completely covered up with brush. It was broken into since we bought it 3 times, where I had to go over there and board up the windows. And so the back lot itself, the commercial lot that we were talking about, homeless people were living back there in the back corner, not so much living there, but they had little campsites set up down in the hole there. So who knows what was going on back there, but now we're developing it, we're turning the house to a beautiful house, where, people come by and say, oh, we love what you're doing to the house, and, we're trying to improve the neighborhood, not degrade it. And I think we can turn it into a nice looking property that we can be all proud of and all enjoy. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Maitland. Okay. Right, Madam Clerk, has this public hearing been advertised in accordance with general statutes?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, we will open this public hearing. We'll go down the list of the people who have signed up. First is James Nunziato. And if you would, for the clerk's record, please give your name and address.
My name is James Nunziato, and I own the property directly across the street at 2114 Stony View Court. And I have to admit that the changes in this property have been fantastic. They really look great. But I have some concerns about what is coming. And my main concern is that the property behind there has no direct access to Highway 25. This is my understanding. And I've also heard that this is going to be an excavating business going in there. It concerns me that excavating equipment and stuff must be transported to and from job sites with heavy trucks, big trailers, loaded down with excavators. And since there's no access directly to Highway 25, the only access to 25 is via Monroe Drive, which is on an incline. I drive a standard Ford pickup truck, and when I leave that property, heading up 25, when you look south, that intersection is partially blind. Traffic is moving north. It's a 40-mile speed zone. And we all know people don't stay at 40 miles an hour. So you have to really make sure that you can get out in plenty of time. Now, big trucks and heavy equipment takes a lot of power and a lot of time to get those rigs moving. So it concerns me that the only feasible, safe way to enter Highway 25 would be through the traffic light on Houston Street. That would require the use of coming down Monroe Drive and turning up North Stony View Court to get to Houston. And that would necessitate all this extra traffic coming through our neighborhood. If I'm correct, and this is going to be heavy traffic going through here, I'm concerned that this is going to raise noise level to an unacceptable level. And it's also going to accelerate the wear and tear on the roads, which were designed as residential and never meant for heavy equipment. And it concerns me that if this is the case, then this would reduce our property values for the rest of the neighborhood. And because of those concerns, I oppose this variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Eloise Lindsay.
Can I answer
That, let's do it all at once then.
Eloise Lindsay, 201 Dixon Drive, Hendersonville. And is it proper to ask you if you've been to this location? Is anyone familiar with this neighborhood?
I've
You
been
are?
through it.
You are, okay, good. So you have an idea of what we're facing as far as the neighborhood that is 3 blocks deep, right on the edge of 25. The property that we're talking about is our buffer zone. It used to have, it's the trees that protect us. And to pave that and add more equipment and another building lessens that buffer, it decreases. So it's just a fragile neighborhood. It's functioning, but it's fragile. And there's another property on 25 between the proposed one and a small strip mall, and we would like to know what is proposed. I mean, are you going to continue giving C3 zoning what's the plan for that edge of the highway, I guess? Are we in danger of losing our neighborhood because we don't have that buffer anymore? And like you said, once this company is gone, it opens it up to any kind of industrial level. And you wouldn't do that inside the city limits. You wouldn't take away property to do industrial inside the city. The closest industrial stuff is past Berkeley, which is a few blocks away. It just seems an abnormal application for this zoning ordinance in the residential neighborhood. Even though we admire Larry's work and effort to prosper, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from that, but it seems like there are other opportunities for industrial use. And why do you need to use a neighborhood for industrial use? And maybe we need better planning for people who do want to have closer access to the city for industrial use. I mean, why not make industrial use properties more beautiful? Why do you have to face the challenge of creating an industrial use in a neighborhood?
Just so you get, it's commercial.
Commercial.
There's two different things.
It's commercial, but not for services.
But I'd say, I just wanted you to
Okay, thank
have
you.
that piece
Thank
of it.
you.
It's a commercial.
Okay. Commercial, but not for providing services to the neighborhood. It's heavy commercial. Anyway, I know that sounded jumbly, but there are a lot of thoughts, and we would like to preserve the neighborhood, and we don't want to lose that buffer as much. Thank you.
Thank you. David Lyda.
I'm David Lotta. I live at 201 Dixon Drive, and I was born and raised in Hendersonville. And my dad bought that property in 1964 at 201 Dixon Drive, which is about a block from where we're talking about, in the Stony Crest neighborhood. And he lived there till 2011. He died then, and I bought the property, moved from Austin, Texas, back to Hendersonville. And My purpose in moving back was to move to my neighborhood, which was quiet. I lived in Nashville, Tennessee for 30, 40 years, then moved to Austin and moved back here because this is crazy living in Texas because this is such a great neighborhood up here. My dad owned it, none of my brothers wanted it, so I bought it. And the neighborhood has stayed very stable. I walk my dog 4 times a day in that neighborhood. And if there was a lot of traffic, more traffic coming from the proposed property to the Y to get access to Asheville Highway, it would infringe on my little walkway with my dog. I'd like to see it stay the same. As far as the land usage 6.4, it fails to meet that definition in 2 ways. It will not adhere to the architectural guidelines already established in the neighborhood for the last 60, 70 years, and it fails to continue as before to encourage neighborhood inclusiveness. I don't see developing this with business in mind. I don't want my property subdivided. If it stays a single home, the way it has been for the last 60, 70 years, I don't see it becoming anything else. Our neighborhood has a bunch of single homes on single plots, half acres, and smaller to 1/3 of an acre. And they're all very nice families, and we all get along well, and I just don't see this encouraging the inclusiveness in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Robin, is it Crawford?
Hi, Robin Crawford. I live at 107 Houston Street at the traffic light that we're talking about. And so I definitely agree with what these guys have said. The house is great. It's coming along wonderfully. It does add to the neighborhood. On the neighborhood side of things, I really am concerned of the heavy equipment coming up through the neighborhood. We've got kids riding bikes, people walking babies in strollers, people walking dogs. We have a very walkable neighborhood, and we're out doing that. I've got kids. I've been living there for 20 years. I live on the corner lot where things would have to come out safely. I definitely agree that Monroe Street with heavy equipment coming out is really not, it would not be safe for a big thing. I know they probably have already had some coming and going, but I see a lot of accidents already at the intersection of Houston Street. I can't imagine the increased number of accidents that would be happening on Monroe when people are flying around that corner and not knowing that heavy equipment is coming out. Without access on 25 directly, I think it's really a dangerous situation, and I would not want to see traffic increase to the neighborhood for the roads and the people, but also accident-wise, it's already a very busy, dangerous intersection, and then increasing that 1 block down, I don't think is going to help the situation.
Thank you. Jack Augustine?
How you doing? My name's Jack Augustine. I live at 2112 North Stoneview Lane. We still try to find out what it is. My concern, you have done a great job on residents, and that's what we were looking for. You know, you did a good job and to make the neighborhood look better. But the problem is we're going to bring a business in here. I'm in construction, and when we get on the job site, I think people like water. We take the least resistance, and we try to do what's easier for us. And let's just say he has people working for him, and where are they going to park? It's not a big lot. And I know me, if I was driving a truck with a trailer and an excavator on back, I'm going to go the easiest route there is. And trying to maneuver left and going uphill, they're not going to want to be coming out on 25 where traffic's coming pretty fast. The easiest route is to turn right, go through the neighborhood, and come out past Robin's house at the set of lights, where it is safer, you know, and that's what I see happening. The other businesses that I see there, like 8AP or O'Reilly, the Ugly Mug, they all enter through 25. They have parking lots in front. They have the building back. That's the buffer between the residents for noise, things going on. that wouldn't be the case here, I don't believe, because the way, how deep that property's down. Okay? He needs that driveway on this side, away from the highway. Okay? So I see it bringing more noise. I'm sure if he has mechanical problems, it'll be more like a machinist shop. We'll hear, ratchet guns going and things like that. And the possibility, if you don't keep it up, it could look messy. So that's just a few of the things besides safety that I just want to bring up. Thank you.
Thank you. David Bishop?
Put that back up.
Yes, I know one of the digital comments we received had photos. Okay, if one of the speakers has submitted those photos, then they can ask that they be shown at the time. Did we have those?
They are, I think Ms. Reese they're in the city council folder for public comment. While they're looking for those, Madam Mayor, just so the council understands I pulled up the map on the GS. So Houston Street is at the intersection of 25 and Stony Mountain Road. That's that intersection, just so everybody's clear of referencing Houston Street. Also, Dixon is farther to the south, because that was not shown on the maps that staff provided, but Dixon.
Are those a quarter mile away, or?
No, that's not a quarter mile. It's typically a block, 4, 5, 6 parcels. So there's 3 intersections into the neighborhood, Monroe being one, Houston being the second one, which is a lighted intersection at Stony Mountain. And then Dixon, I do not believe is lighted. It is the intersection farther south, closer, just as the crow flies to where the Ingalls is, going that direction. So I just want to make sure council understood, since we referenced Dixon and Houston there. So.
The photos that I saw were the comments from Mia Augustine. They were attached to that digital comment. We'll find them. Okay.
And did we find them?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
If you would come and explain. Are you Mia Augustine?
I'm Mia.
Okay.
I actually did not I'd like to say that we did not receive notice of this meeting, just for the record. My husband and I live very close to this home. We live across adjacent. People down the road, 1 or 2 received notices. We didn't receive notices.
Sorry, what is your address again?
It's 2112 North Stony View, Court Drive, whatever you want to call it, depending on the post office. What I'm showing you is the corner of Monroe. This is this gentleman's home. He has done a wonderful job. With that, though, we've also put up with, for 2 years, the construction. The people he employs, we've had some situations with drugs coming into the neighborhood. So when you talk about neighborhood integrity, a lot of people haven't really brought this up, and I hate to bring it up, but sometimes you employ people that you don't know, and they're on the property. And for 2 years, we've dealt with this big truck. If you look at this little corner lot, you can see that there's 3 trucks already there. This business hasn't even started. If you scroll down, I'll show, there's more photos. This is the corner. This is a blind corner, as this gentleman talked about. It's not a safe corner to begin with. We see children riding their bicycles, and if they do not stop at the stop sign, which happens often, we're afraid for them, because it right on the side of this, keep going, keep scrolling, there's more. Okay, so right there, I want you to see what we're dealing with now without this business even here. We're gonna go around that corner, and we're supposed to see beyond that truck to get to Asheville Highway. We can't take that road. So you're talking about, there's 2 entrances, there is not a third to Ingalls. There's only 2 ways out for everybody living from Asheville Highway all the way back, what's the last street, Dixon? All the way back. So you've got 4 rows of homes, and these are our only 2 ways of egress out. This is the front of my this is in front of my house right here. So you see where that white house is, and you see the mailbox with the flowers on it. We did not receive notice of any meeting in regards to rezoning. And when you say .06, what exactly is that? Is that a quarter of an acre? Is that half of an acre? Is that a third of an, what is that?
Well, a quarter is .25, and so a tenth of an acre is .10.
And what does he want?
So .06
is more than half.
No, it's less than a tenth.
Well, less than 10.
It's less.
Okay, but it makes the difference between actually being able to put in what he wants to put in. And we've been trying to protect this neighborhood for a number of years. Some of these people have lived in this neighborhood since the beginning, or their family has. It's unfair that they bought in a neighborhood where Asheville Highway was only 2 lanes at the time. It turned into 4. Not only is this a blind spot where he's parking, look at even his vehicle, it's parked right on the corner. So we're dealing with this now, and we're being told, well, this is gonna be great, this is gonna be wonderful. Well, if we've dealt with this for 2 years, we've dealt with noise on Sunday, noise all day Saturday, noise early in the morning where we can't sleep. If this was your neighborhood, would you want it? This is what you need to ask yourself. Do you want this in your neighborhood? He's not going to live in this neighborhood. And when he was asked, well, this is going to affect the neighborhood. Well, I don't care. I'm going to sell the house. That's the problem with people who want to flip houses. Yes, they do a beautiful job, but they don't care. They're going to make their money, walk away, and he wants to run a business in the back. Well, if it's just a little tiny piece of land, why does he care? He cares because he has no way to pull out with heavy, big equipment. This is not a dog groomer. This is not a tiny shop. This is going to be, he has it advertised. He has a sign in front that we can see that says a construction company remodeling. He has a sign on this busy blind spot that says an excavating business. He's already advertising his business, so we all know it is an excavating business. And I know I'm upset, but I see the danger in this neighborhood. And now it's on record.
Thank you. David Bishop. David Bishop?
David Bishop.
Are you David Bishop?
No, ma'am.
Well, David Bishop was the next person who signed up. We'll get.
Derek.
Oh, Derek, I'm sorry.
The only thing I got to add is, I mean, I agree with everybody. It's heavy traffic. I got, kids that ride bicycles. We all walk our dogs. We don't want it, all the heavy traffic. The neighborhood's already got enough traffic. That's all I got to add.
Okay. Thank you. Greg Warren.
Good morning, council, and good morning, neighbors. Greg Warren, I've lived at 2109 North Stony View Court for 27 years. During this time, our road in front of us has never had heavy traffic It has never had any repairs done to it, no paving or anything. I agree with everything that's been said. He has done a beautiful job on refurbishing that house. I agree with what everybody else says. I have called the sheriff's department before when people has broke into the house, when he first bought it. I have actually seen drug deals going on at 5 a.m. in the morning and personally run the people off. We're consistently seeing more riffraff coming through the neighborhood. And I believe that if we have a construction company back there, that entices more people to go in there and break into it. It's going to bring more riffraff in there. The main thing is what I've been hearing is talking about preserving a neighborhood. It is a neighborhood. I have a 3-year-old granddaughter that comes over quite often, and she rides her little remote control car up and down the road, tricycle. We are starting to see more kids in the neighborhood riding their bikes, as Mia said, and they do go down through there sometimes, and they don't stop at that stop sign. They go right through. But we are seeing a uptick in more family in there now, and we want to keep it that way. The main thing is we want to preserve our neighborhood, so we can walk freely with our dogs and our family. And it's just a wonderful neighborhood, and we want to keep it that way. Thank you.
Barbara Cromar?
My name is Barbara Cromar, and I live at 2030 South Stonyview. I have a question first that I would like addressed. The C3 zoning, CCD, states, in my understanding, that it is for business on Asheville Highway to have easy access for traffic going by. Is that correct? That's what it says in the planning program. So that's what the zoning plan says. I think it's on page 24 or 22. And to have that easy access, it would incur a driveway going to a business that's in C3, CZD, that's hard for me to say. And the driveway that is going into this particular piece is on Monroe, which enters our residential area. So is the top half of Monroe city zoned C3 and the bottom half is residential? Question. I don't know.
You can
So the top of the road is city and the second half of the road is county.
Can you pull up the map that just shows the entire commercial district along
Yeah, with the
Asheville
pink
Highway?
and,
just
pink and
to-
the orange.
Yeah, there, that one. There you go.
So it would be, if you're going to have a business and we're looking at rezoning it for C3 up by Asheville Highway, then put your driveway there. However, whatever that costs you, whatever that goes with, put your driveway that goes with the planning of C3 CZD off 25, not in the residential area. That's my first comment. My second one is the house is nice. It was an old house. It's improved. It's going to be sold. It wasn't gratuitously done to make the neighborhood nice. It was done to make a profit. I mean, you're in business, good for you. When you bought the property, it was all residential to a point. And you knew that. Having the property changed in a rezoning is a foresight. It wasn't like a hindsight from a football game. So that must have been an intention. According to proposed site, there's going to be a garage with a loading dock has been proposed, 25 by 55, and another building to be put on that site, whether it be permanent or not. That's a site proposal. What do you need a loading dock for? You need the 30 feet in order to maneuver trucks. Well, now you're in my neighborhood. You want to stay on your C3, knock your socks off. You want available access, take it from 25, like every other business, and what it says in the planning code. There have already been holes on Monroe that were there for a long time due to trucks, and they were filled in. Is the 30 feet that you are requesting the county? Because we're county. Or is it city? I don't know. No one's answered that. If it's, God bless you, residential, it's probably county, because we're in the county. We don't have sewers. We have county water. We don't pay taxes, city tax, so we're county. All right, those were two things. The property apparently is not retail, as Mrs. Maitland said. It is, and the additional 30 feet will help maneuver traffic. So specifically, if it's not retail, are you going to be running business out of there? Are clients going to come? I don't know. He's in construction, which is great. Heavy trucks on the road. My biggest concern is what you had stated. When you go to sell this property, now it's zoned commercial, 30 feet into my residential area. With the big plans that Henderson has, Hendersonville, of their larger scope of planning, this will probably set a precedent. And there are two other pieces of property that back up to 25, let's say. One of them had a sign on it that said commercial property right on Stony View in the residential area. Well, is it commercial or is it residential, and where does that split? So that's my biggest concern. I've lived there. I have I'm gonna die in that house rather than move again. And I don't want to see the slowly move of the city changing zones. I'm in the county. I like the county. As far as traffic goes, I agree. I was in construction business for a long time. Trucks, if you have a full load or you're coming back with a piece of equipment, turning, you need a traffic light. So you're going to have traffic going through. We're county. City doesn't fix our roads. Took me 5 months to get a street sign put back up. So those are big concerns of mine. I don't knock having a business, just meet planning, have the entrance off 25. I'm sorry that it's a deep pitch. You chose to put your business there. Deal with the planning. Thank you.
I may address a couple of points that have come up and just provide some clarification. First, on the notice requirements, when a zoning map, this is from 1151, section 1151 of the zoning ordinance. When a zoning map amendment is proposed, the owner of that parcel of land, as shown on the county tax listing, and the owners of all parcels of land abutting that parcel of land, as shown on the county tax listing, shall be mailed a notice of a public hearing on the proposed amendment by first-class mail. And so it's different than our other notice requirements, maybe for a CZD, where it has to go out 400 feet and notify that we mail everyone within 400 feet. It's just abutting property owners. And so that's just a point of clarification on the notification. And staff met those requirements. It was also posted, sign was posted.
So there was a, just so to clarify, there was a sign on the property, a yellow sign that would have identified the dates for the zoning maps and those kind of things. So
That's correct. So it was published in the newspaper as also called for in 1151, and posted notice of public hearing on the site proposed for rezoning or on an adjacent public street or highway right-of-way. Notice shall be 18 by 24. That's item C under 1151, and that was met as well. If we can go back to the map that was just up, the side-by-side maps. Just quickly want to point out the C3 zoning that is in place along Asheville Highway. It actually has a number of vacant lots in addition to this one, this one that's adjacent to the portion under consideration for rezoning. And so while it stands that way today, all of that is zoned commercial and could potentially be redeveloped. Access is a little bit different in this case because there is access coming off of Monroe Drive. They have, my understanding is that they have received a permit, a driveway permit from NCDOT. Both Asheville Highway and Monroe Drive are NCDOT streets, not city streets or local streets. So I wanted to point that out. Another kind of key wrinkle with this would be that if the rezoning does not go through, a buffer would be required along the current, actually, can you go to the survey? It might be a little bit easier to kind of picture. The buffer would be required, there you go, along that zoning, the dashed dotted line, buffering between the C3 and the R10 as it stands today. If it does not go through, that's where the buffer would have to occur. There would be no other adjacent residentially zoned parcels, so no other buffering would have to take place. If the rezoning was approved and the R10 was shifted and C3 was expanded, then the buffer line would have to go here and here, because this is residentially zoned. So there would be a buffer that would have to be installed here, and this was mentioned by the applicant, here and here, if it goes through. If it doesn't, only a buffer here. So there would be no buffer for that residential property to the south, as required by code. So just briefly, if no rezoning is approved, a buffer would be required at the time of a site plan, a buffer between the C3 zoning and the R10 zoning would be required along this line.
And what is that line?
That is the current zoning district boundary.
So where's it gonna be moved?
So the proposal is to shift the zoning district boundary to align with this line, the new property line. If that is approved, if the zoning district boundary is shifted, then a buffer would then be required along this line as well as this line across the south here.
So that narrow strip is the .06 that they are proposing to rezone. That narrow strip is the only thing in question.
That's right.
And so he's just trying to show you where currently if they have to provide a buffer along the dotted line, if the zoning was approved on that narrow strip of .06, then it would be shifted, and then they would be required to fulfill that entire back line and the sideline of buffering, of plantings.
How much buffer is required in C3s?
Tyler, you know the buffer type? Type B buffer. So we've got 105 on the back, so roughly that amount on one side, and then a third of that on the southern side. Did everyone hear that? I'm not sure.
They might not.
Tyler, do you want
They
to
may
come?
not have heard it. Why don't you- Yeah, why don't you read that up here?
Can you read that up here?
So the city's type B buffer requirements are 4 broadleaf canopy trees, 25 evergreen shrubs, 33 flowering shrubs, and that's per 100 linear feet. So the long parcel line that abuts the residential, that's like 105 feet. So that's basically kind of telling you what would be along that strip right there, and then a lesser version of that would be along that 32-foot strip.
How deep is it?
So it's 10 feet, I believe. Yeah, it's a 10-foot type B buffer, so it's 10 feet wide minimum.
So in other words, that means that
A third of
of
that.
this, portion, which is about 30 feet, 10 feet of that at the end and along this edge down here, not along Monroe Street, would have to have these plantings and no building, nothing in it.
No, most of that would be, a lot of that would be taken up by the buffer.
Yeah.
So there is caliper regulation, so for the trees, it's 1 1/2 or 1 3/4 inch calipers, and for the shrubs, it's between 18 and 24 inches at planting.
Okay, thank you. We'll get, see if there's anyone else who would like to speak before going back. People have already spoken.
I just had one quick comment on that survey.
Well, we'll get to that. First, I'd like to know if there's anyone who has not spoken who wishes to comment. Yes, come to the microphone, give your name and address.
My name is Ron Brett. I live at 2201 North Stony View Court, adjacent to his property. Like everybody else in the neighborhood, I applaud him for the work he's done on the house. But the back part of that property is no place to put a business, excuse me, to have traffic coming in, out of the neighborhood, where you've got lots of pedestrians walking, kids getting off school buses, okay? And definitely reducing property values. I've lived in this neighborhood for 44 years. Like somebody else said, he's not even gonna live in this house. He's either gonna rent it out or sell it. Would you want this being done in your neighborhood? Think about it. Anything else that I can say? Well, the noise and everything too. I live right next door. You're gonna have noise constantly coming from his business. Okay? When I moved in to the neighborhood, Asheville Highway was a little 2-lane highway. No businesses, no auto parts stores, no Bilo's across the street that was there for quite a few years. Okay? And all of a sudden, they widened the highway. Everything went commercial through there. And like I said earlier, it reduced property value big time. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who has not yet spoken who would like to speak?
It's a gentleman in the back.
No. No, anyone who has not yet spoken, please, at this point.
My name is Brad Newman. I live at 2215 Evergreen Drive. You'll have to forgive me. as soon as I sat down, I was telling my neighbor that if I have to speak in front of more than 5 people, my face freezes. So I'm just going to kind of do my best. But I'm actually strangely torn on all of this. On one hand, I actually think 2 things have kind of been understated, even though they've both been said 20 times. One of them is that for the last 2 years, driving by, I've watched this dude roofing and excavating and cleaning up a property that 2 years ago, it looked like a haunted house. It looked like, it really was like weeds growing up like over your knees, and it looked awful. And I remember at some point, even driving by with sort of morbid curiosity every time the garage door was open, looking in as I'm driving by, and even inside the house, it looked like a catacomb. It didn't look great. And compared to what it looked like before, he has done an outstanding job. I mean, it's night and day. And I actually think that that's, at this point, even been understated. I also think the other thing that's been understated is the intersection at Monroe and Asheville Highway. And I'd like to think I have reflexes like a ninja, but when I'm pulling out on the Asheville Highway off of that street, it's a nail biter every single time. It's kind of one of those intersections where regardless of the speed limit that's posted there, there's like a moment, like a tense moment every time you want to pull out, where you have to take a little act of faith, you have to take a little gamble and just punch it to get out on the road, because people come flying around that corner pretty fast, and you don't have a lot of time. So it does concern me that basically heavier trucks, and by the way, I haven't actually heard it said by them that there is going to be 2-ton trailers pulling out or pulling into there. So I guess I'm a little bit unfamiliar with what they intend to put there, and I would like to hear it. Like, I'd like to know whether it's going to be like a sort of commercial metal building garage, and if it is indeed pulling out onto Monroe Street, I think there's a lot of reason to be concerned about, box trucks and stuff like that. That said, he's widened the driveway of that house. The trucks that I've seen in there, granted right now there's campers and stuff down in there, but I don't know that this isn't actually turning into what will just be an office with cars pulling in and out. But so like I said, I'm split, and I think where I have to fall on these issues is, I moved into this neighborhood not too long before the Maitland did, and like 4 years ago, and there are people that live within eyeshot of that house that have been there for a long time, and they're my neighbors, and I think that, officially I should support whether they approve or disapprove of this, and I do. But at the same time, I'm not sure that I've heard the whole story from the Maitlands, and so, I'd like to hear more. And if nothing else, if my understanding is correct that he's an excavator, if the driving in and out can actually happen where his Zone C3 property meets Asheville Highway, if the trucks are pulling in and out there, then I might actually have to feel completely differently about it. So those are my thoughts on it. Like I said, officially, I support my neighbors. So thank you.
Thank you.
Is it not important that we keep putting it out here that it doesn't matter if we rezone this to C3, it doesn't matter what the Maitlands put in there. It only matters what C3 permits. So if you were just putting in a dog grooming place, quiet, whatever, when you sold it, C3 comes in there. Do we even want to just say what's C3?
So we have the list of uses pulled up. If Allison wants to pull that on.
I mean, because this is,
Could we get any further public comment first, and then?
You're the mayor, we can do whatever you say.
And then we'll get.
I'm sorry.
Get a little more information.
I forgot my place.
Is there anyone who has not yet spoken here who wishes to speak? Is there anyone virtual, oh, okay, then, please.
My name's Pamela Patharon, and I live at 2113 North Stony View Court. This is my house on the right-hand side. Yes, he has beautified the property. It looks gorgeous. Love it. I've lived there for over 15 years. I've looked at it for over 10 years being a mess. And it wasn't pretty at all. So when he came along and he started cleaning it, it was like, you know, it was a relief. But I never thought in a million years that I would have this in my backyard. You know, they're very nice people. They're very, you know, and I don't want to start no problems with them, but I don't want this in my backyard.
Ms. Padron, when you send in some digital comments with pictures, did you want those shown at this time?
Yes.
Can you find that from the?
I'm very nervous. This is from the side of my house, the side of my property line. This is what I have looked at and dealt with, but I thought that this wasn't gonna be a permanent thing with the trailer being parked there. You know, 'cause I know he's not gonna leave that there. You know, it's just right now, he has his worker, somebody living in there to fix the property. So I've dealt with that. And it's just, for safety reasons, for the children, my granddaughter, she comes over, we walk up and down the road with her, and how am I gonna do that now? People walk their dogs. I mean, every day I'm on my porch, there's about 10, 15 people coming back and forth with their dogs walking. Him with his granddaughter. I mean, is this not a business? It's residential, period, you know? And it is a danger, the driveway that he has going out onto Monroe to 25. We have to guess at whether we can pull out or not. So I really, you know, it's very upsetting to me, because I thought that this was going to be something that he was going to rent. You know, I didn't have a problem with that. But all this, I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who has not yet spoken who wishes to speak? Okay, is there, yes, sir.
I didn't sign the sheet there.
That's
My name is David Winters. I live at 107 Houston Street. I live right by that traffic light. And the reality is, I mean, I heard them talk about buffers. I've heard them talk about all this stuff. It's not about the buffers. Whatever business goes in there, if it is dog grooming, if it is a construction company, it's going to increase traffic to that light, that intersection. And I don't know how much time you all have to look, but if you look at how many accidents have happened at that traffic light, it's not possible for somebody to pull out on Monroe. It's not with heavy equipment, and it's not safe, like that gentleman said, just in your regular car to pull out on Monroe. So maybe the answer is put a light there at Monroe as a possibility if he wants to have that put in there. I mean, it's already zoned commercial in the front, and I think Barbara even brought that up. If he had another way to get out, but he's not going to get out any other way than to drive through the neighborhood. And I think whatever it is, if it's him or if he sells it to somebody, it's going to just put traffic in front of that light. And it's going to cause more accidents. And I don't think it's safe. And that's really what I wanted to say more than anything. But he did a great job with the house. The house is beautiful. If it doesn't work out for him, I'm hoping he'll make the money back on it because it's a beautiful home and it's a great neighborhood. And I think that's about all I have to say, but thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak who has not yet spoken? Is there anyone online who is seeking recognition to speak?
Mayor Volk, there's nobody online with their hands raised at the moment.
I'd like to make a clarification. If you can pull the survey back up, I misspoke earlier, and I hate to be on the record with something that's incorrect. So, and especially with the adjacent property owner having just spoken and want to make sure things are clear. I had stated if the rezoning does not go through, then a buffer would be required along the district boundary line as it exists today. That is incorrect. Buffers, very clearly in the zoning code, it says buffers are placed adjacent to property lines, not zoning district lines. And so this is a good example of why it, as the technical staff that deal with applying the zoning code, when parcel lines and district lines don't line up, when you have a split zone, it can get very challenging to understand how to apply the code. And so in this case, we would have to make a determination if a buffer would be required on this property line, because the adjacent use would be, the zoning would be R10, but the parcel line is where the buffer goes, and the use is over here, which is single family, but that's on a separate parcel. So if the zoning does not go through, it's unclear, but a determination would have to be made as to whether a buffer would be required on this line. If the zoning does not go through, no buffer would be required on this property. If the zoning does go through, a buffer would be required along this property line and this property line. Just want to make that clarification. Thank you.
All right. Are there any final comments or questions? Yes, sir.
One quick comment on the survey.
Yeah, come to the microphone so it can be
Can you bring the
recorded.
survey back up?
He asked, could you pull this?
There you go. It doesn't matter whether you approve this variance or not, the official driveway on the survey is in the residential. So even if you did approve this, you would still have a driveway on the survey in a residential neighborhood accessing commercial property.
Thank you. Yes.
Barbara Cromar, 2030 South Stonyview. If the zoning did not go through, it would be difficult to sell that house without a buffer, because whoever bought it would be looking at trucks and gravel. So in my estimation, you want to sell the house, you'd have to put something up. And the other thing, I have a question, it kind of went by too fast, I didn't hear it. How did it occur, or when did it occur to get the driveway, the second driveway put into the C3 zone? How did that happen? You said they put in a permit or a... So,
Yeah, the city doesn't regulate that. North Carolina Department of Transportation would regulate that, so that would be a separate process from the city.
so they put that in before any consideration was proposed?
I don't think, well,
Driveway is fully on the portion that is C3.
Yeah, it
It's not
is.
in the portion that is considered for the rezoning.
And the point he's making is that we do not have the authority to grant driveway permits.
Okay,
So what went into their mind for doing it, I don't know.
okay, so the issue of having access and driveway that goes to planning, on the planning thing,
NCDOT planning.
And that has nothing to do with the, I can't say it again, C3CZD access code from 25.
I know that this is going to be frustrating as a resident, and as a council member, it's also frustrating. But when it comes to a situation like this where actual highway is right there, which is a state road, and then, of course, Monroe Street is not our street either, while we have control over zoning, access to roads is out of our control. That's legislatively set. So I totally understand why this makes you mad, this response, but the law says we do not have control over access to roads. We do have control over the zoning. So that's why we cannot, legislate.
And the DOT, to get that permit, it was not a public issue. It was, this is my property, I can get the permit.
Yes.
But you also can contact DOT. I want to point that out. Yeah.
But to answer your question, typically, DOT will allow access to individual property. I mean, unless it becomes, yeah.
I guess I'm having a real hard time deciding what part of Monroe is city and county. I don't, if it's
All of
not
Monroe Street
maintained
is
by
in
the city, and this is part of the city, I don't get it. So if there's a hole in the road at the corner of Stony View and Monroe, I call the county. But if there's a hole in the road of 25 in Monroe, I call the city.
No, ma'am.
Technically, you call it DOT. That's their road.
Got it. Thank you.
And I might also point out, they would not let us fix that if we wanted to. I'm being honest. Yeah.
Can I get one clarification from Matt? You said that the driveway is already in the part that's C3.
That's correct.
Yes, sir.
I've been told, Jack Augustine again, I was told that the highway had been widened. And I know years ago, my dad told me a story. He had a wooded lot, and they were putting a highway through it. They didn't want it, but the people that owned the land, it was an interstate highway, they had to be compensated for the loss of their land. And I'm just kind of curious, whoever owned that commercial property and anybody else along that highway, were they compensated? Were they paid the value of the loss? If so, they knew that that property was going to be smaller. And if somebody else had bought this house, a regular homeowner, this wouldn't even be possible or even be being brought up to have it rezoned. It's because he does own the front property that they want the line moved. But my thing is when that highway was widened, if they were compensated, that was the payment to have that encroached on. Now, we want the property encroached into the residence. It's not fair.
Thank you. All right. Okay. The Maitlands would like to respond or comment? This will be the last of the comments. We're not going to have back and forth after this.
Thank you. Mary Maitland. I'm a little overwhelmed with all the comments, but the driveway that is there is fully within the C3 zoning. That part of Monroe is part of the C3 zoning. And it has been approved by the Department of Transportation. We're only asking for a little bit of the property from the residential to add to the commercial lot so that the maneuverability within that is easier. The amount of trucks and cars that you've seen at the house were cars and trucks from workers that were working on the house. We don't have employees, we hire subcontractors. So they have their own place that they
call their office. The building that we are proposing to go in this property is for my husband's personal office and storage of equipment and materials. As far as excavating goes, what you've seen is what there is. There's no more. And no one has complained about our equipment so far. He has his,
Okay, no, we're not going to have back and forth. This is time for you
so
to make comments.
we're not bringing huge trailers, trucks, and so forth. What the residents of this subdivision have seen is what we have. We don't have any more than that. And as far as the pictures that lady showed a few minutes ago, that was the backyard of the house. This back lot was fully overgrown with brush. We cleared it out because there were homeless people camping back there. This house was actually being squatted in, and we had to board it up. I've spent numerous hours picking up glass from windows that were broken right next door to this lady's house, a few feet from your house. And we've cleaned that up. We've made it a beautiful place, and we intend to make the commercial lot beautiful as well. We're going to have it lit so that no more homeless people can camp there. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. All right, we will, yes, Mr. Maitland. Yeah.
Larry again. I listened to all your concerns and stuff like that, and I'm trying to do the best I can for everybody there. The neighbor showed a picture of the front yard where there's a car in it blocking the corner. Well, she didn't say that that car is on a 4-place parking spot. That's not in the road. It's off the road, but she showed the picture of that. They showed my equipment blocking the corner. Well, I have to have a place to put it. Well, I'm getting the back part developed, you know. And then the big concern is, I think if you pull up the plot land thing again, if you can, of the survey, you know, a lot of people complain about, you know, that corner being real edgy of getting out, which it is. And what the thing is, you have to realize that the city cut that big sliver of property off. So I don't own that now. Well, that's all overgrown with trees and brush and shrubs. So when you come up to that driveway, you can't see around the corner. Well, that's not my property there. My property starts halfway down the lot down there. Even though I'm up there clearing that property off so we can get a good view around the corner, you know, so people don't get, you know, can get out easier. I've been working on that. The other thing someone mentioned, oh yeah, the school bus drops off kids. Well, they don't drop off kids on 25 there. They come all the way down into the subdivision. So the subdivision doesn't start until the investment house. Not once since I've been there for 2 years working on that house, I've never seen a kid playing in the street or any of these families walking their dogs or walking their kids up and down 25 to that street because it goes to the 25. Where my driveway comes into the commercial lot, that's beyond the subdivision. It's on the commercial lot. I have an extra wide driveway, so I don't have to go through the subdivision, and that's what this sliver is helping me with. So I can, when I pull out, I can just pull out to the left, you know, not going through the subdivision. And I don't have heavy equipment. I have a single axle truck. It's a little bit bigger than a pickup truck. And I have what they call a mini excavator, which is a very small excavator. So it's not like, in 90% of the time, all my work is outside, not there. That's all I want to say.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. We'll close this public hearing. Counsel?
Yes. Yes, comments?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is a direct example of why we have conditional use zoning, because of the statements that have been made by the landowners about what they plan to do, the concerns that the residents have about what will happen. That's why we have conditional zoning, which is when we grant a zoning change and it says you can do this and this only, so that everybody knows what's going to happen. And so, to me, this is a prime example of why that's in place. So, for me, I am going to vote against this simply, well, to start with, because it's not conditional use, so that it's real clear to the residents what can go there or what would go there, as opposed to what's on the C3 list, which is a very long list of possible things. With that, though, I think several residents have commented, which is true, you know, a portion of this is C3, so we have no control if they are in permissible uses for that. So absent them asking to extend this into the residential yard, we wouldn't even be here today. So hopefully everybody understands that part. C3 is in place, and we have no control over the part of the property that is already C3.
I just wanted to point out too that several of you live on, I guess, Stony View, and that a lot of your backyards butt up to all C3 properties. And at some point, those properties are going to be sold or developed. And again, we don't have control over what essentially, I mean, within a limitation of certain things, but there's a long list of things that are, potential for that commercial zoning district. And so, I hate to say it like this, but, those properties are going to be developed at some point. I don't know when, but, the city is growing and people are buying properties and developing them, and, it's getting busier. And so at some point, those things where we don't actually have control over what's going there, it's going to happen at some point. And, I think everybody loves the days where it was 2-lane roads and, all of those things, but the change is happening. And, I just want you to be aware that a lot of your properties already butt up to commercial zoning districts. And, so we might not be able to have any control over those situations. I do want to point out that corner of the road that's really overgrown, that is in the DOT right-of-way. I serve on the DOT committee for the city of Hendersonville, and I will be happy to reach out to our regional DOT folks, and I think the city, we can also work with them and contact them about kind of making some more visibility or increasing visibility at that corner. I don't know what the requirements are for lights or traffic lights. I don't think that they would put a traffic light there if they've already got one down on Houston. But as far as visibility pulling in and out of Monroe there, if that's something desired by the neighborhood to have more visibility and cut back some of the brush on that corner, I'm happy to reach out to the DOT and ask them to to increase visibility if that's what you guys, would like to see happen. But we can, and that's regardless of what happens with this property. Once again, they don't own that property and they can't alter that property. But if you're concerned about visibility ever or safety pulling out onto that road, I'm happy to contact them. So that's all I have to say.
Any other comments?
I have a question, but I didn't know if Lindsay or Jeff or the mayor wanted to say anything before I ask.
Go ahead.
So I have a question. Today, if we simply did not vote on this rezoning, in the hopes that maybe someone might come to us with a conditional zoning request, how does that change the process? In other words, do we start from scratch all over again, or can this simply be modified in the same, round of procedure?
So if the applicant were to come back with a conditional zoning request, it would have to go through the neighborhood compatibility plan.
We start all over again.
Right.
Regardless, so if we voted it down, it doesn't matter. If they want to do conditional zoning,
We haven't done a neighborhood compatibility, we haven't, and any change to the request would require the full noticing each.
They'd have to go through all that process.
Yes.
Yes, may I add one piece to that, please? So
The zoning ordinance also says, and it's relevant to your question, that there's a one-year waiting period to apply for another map amendment to the same property, so a CZD would be considered a different one, from the date of final determination by city council.
That's if there was a vote.
Correct.
If there was no vote, then that
That's
year's
correct.
waiting period would not apply.
I would interpret that they could withdraw their application and resubmit.
And can we explain why a conditional zoning application did not take place?
So the applicant was just expanding the smaller section, and at the time, staff's recommendation was to do a standard rezoning.
Ms. Beaker, just so we're clear on your last comment,
Yes, sir.
if we were to basically, I'm not going to use the word abstain, if we were to basically not vote on this today, they could is it resubmit or or is it change,
They would have to,
amend?
yes, sir. They would have to submit a new application for the entire new property, not just the, I mean, they could do it for just the strip, but
Right,
I wouldn't
no, no.
see any purpose in that.
Correct. And they could do that immediately.
Yes, sir.
That would not have to wait 1 year.
Correct. That's how I read the statute, but I just thought before you voted, you may want to know that.
So how do we do that? if we
Would that be
don't wanna vote?
additional fees?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I have no idea what those are. But yes.
Regardless of whether this is approved today or not, it doesn't change anything as far as our purposes are, because it's already zoned commercial. So I don't see any advantage to prolonging it, even if it is denied. We still have the same guidelines to follow as far as the buffer zone is concerned, whether or not it's approved. And it doesn't change our site plan. I don't know what advantage it would be to reapply under a different type of application.
Thank you. No, we're not having any more public comment or questions. It's time for council to discuss. Anyone else want to comment?
So I understand the majority of this parcel is already C3, and I understand that it is a very small portion that they are asking to rezone, but I do think that it sets a precedent for anyone else who owns a portion of those C3 properties, when they are developed, to come in and say, I want to move the property line back, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. And we've already said yes to this, so.
But they would also have to own the property.
They would, but I just think that if this were a conditional rezoning, I might feel a little bit different, because I know that the applicant has the best of intentions, but like Jeff said earlier, if they choose to sell it, or if they sell their business to somebody else, they could then do any of that laundry list of permitted uses. And so I think the benefit of filing a different application for you would be if we did not vote today, then you would not have to wait a year to file that. Whereas if we did vote today, you would have to wait a year, and therefore that piece of property still stays residential.
May I add one clarification? If they applied for a different zoning, the 1 year would not apply. I'm assuming they would come back for the C3. You see what I mean? It's complicated. I didn't want to introduce that, but just so the record is clear, so if they came back for a C2 or I don't know, it wouldn't apply.
Is CZD not different zoning?
I guess it is. So maybe it wouldn't. So anyway, okay. We've
But-
struggled with this language on other
Right.
applications.
But we're clear today that if we don't vote it down, in other words, and we just don't vote, we know for a fact they could walk in here this afternoon and amend this and we begin that process.
Yes.
The other one, we're a little iffy on whether or not.
As I sit here and think about it, I think that would be considered different, but I think it's still a valid point that if you didn't vote, at least it might give staff and the applicants a chance to talk so that the applicants would understand whether there is truly a benefit or not to them to submit a new application.
I just wanted to, a couple clarifying things, or maybe additional information. So the zoning ordinance does permit the community development director to adjust zoning districts to it when there are split zonings, minor amounts. We did not do that in this case because there was the comp plan, but because of that was one of the reasons that we recommended just a standard rezoning process versus a CZD. So the code sort of indicated that there was a lower threshold for this kind of situation where you have a property with a split zoning and a small portion would be rezoned to accommodate the having that whole parcel under one zoning. So just additional information for where the staff recommendation for doing standard rezoning came from. The other comment just that I would make, obviously the site plan is not tied to the standard rezoning. What Ms. Maitland just spoke to, that they would potentially be able to proceed with a commercial project on the parcel, is accurate. It would have to meet the existing C3 zoning standards and the setbacks and so on and so forth along those lines, but that would be possible. And so what they're proposing to do could proceed without any rezoning.
Let me ask another question, Ms. Speaker,
Yes, sir.
which is if we, I guess, I don't know if the term is continued, but if we just said we're going to vote on this the next meeting, what does that mean?
You can absolutely do that. You don't continue this meeting, you don't do anything, you just defer voting until the next meeting.
No, I mean, does that allow them, if they want to amend and change in the meantime, can they do that?
Sure.
In other words, if we don't vote, we could still vote the next meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay.
On this,
On
but
this.
not on something else.
Not on CZ.
Because there
I
has to
agree,
be
but
neighborhood
but it would not be a
compatibility.
final determination, that's my point, based upon what you've told
Right,
us.
that's correct.
Public hearing would not be reopened unless there was some substantial change.
Well, I know for me, I would prefer them come with CCD. I'm concerned if we vote it down and they have to wait a year, that's probably, we don't know for sure, but sitting here right now, we know that they could amend it and come back CZD and start that process. I would hate for them to have to wait a year. I do think there's some conversations that need to be had between people sitting out there outside of council meetings that might help this process. But that's my feeling of reason for not voting today. Do you make a motion, let's vote?
You want to make a motion then to postpone the vote on this meeting till our next council meeting?
Do we have to do that?
Is the applicant able to withdraw their application at any time?
Yes, I believe they could.
And then we wouldn't have to make a decision whether we were voting if they actually withdrew their application and said that they want to submit a conditional application, correct?
Correct.
Are you guys interested in doing that today? Withdrawing your application and then submitting a conditional application?
Well, I like the idea of being able to sit and talk with the zoning department about what our ordinance are and why before we make it.
So if you did not vote today, that's 30 days to come back And if the applicant felt like they were gonna go forward and without the change, then you could just vote to deny it or whatever the case may be, or they could withdraw it and we could take it off the agenda, right? I mean,
Correct.
or not put it on the agenda.
wouldn't go back on.
Wouldn't go on the agenda. So 30 days of not taking action today doesn't sound like it hurts anybody.
Okay. I don't think that you can say motion to table. What is the correct,
Just to postpone the discussion until
the
Next
August regular
August
schedule?
meeting.
Okay. Madam Mayor, I move that we postpone the discussion and vote on this rezoning until the regularly scheduled August city council meeting, which I think is the 5th? August 5th.
Okay. Motion is to postpone. Is there any discussion? Those in favor of postponing this issue until the next meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it, and we'll give time for the applicant to talk with staff. Thank you all for coming.
Ms. Cromar,
Okay, this is,
Ms. Cromar, can I speak to you before you leave?
okay, so we are adjourned.
Ms. Cromar.